Machine pencil cartography. There is a navigational technique called collecting features. The concept of this technique is that when you stop to ask somebody for directions, they will create a list of geographical features that they have encountered along the way. Collecting features is a navigational technique which will describe the entire navigational course, and it will describe each of the features equally, even the ones which were less fascinating. My plan for today is to introduce some of the lesser appreciated geographical features. We have 3 of them: a grassy plain, a Palustrian area or a swamp, and finally a wide open plain known as a bare. It is important to discuss these features in order to build geographical and navigational literacy. On the topic of grassy plains, these are actually an interesting topic. The original purpose of machine pencil cartography is to educate its audience on cartographic concepts and not only navigational concepts. In cartography, I have learned that in the study of grasses, the grasses are anatomically similar to hair systems. This is a field in topography known as trichology, and trichology is a study of hair systems. What you need to know about trichology is that every strand of grass is the same as a fiber. Fibers are a topographical name for a string. In trichology, you are studying something called a fiber bundle, where there is a surface, usually called the scalp, and the surface will generate the strands of hairs. The scalp will generate many strands in the same set and will not generate one solitary strand of hair. Therefore, a trichologist should study the statistics of large sets and should explain the statistical composition of the grass plot as if it were a large set. There are some characteristics of these fiber bundles, such as the average length and the surface area density of the grass. This is generally how you perform a trichological examination. How it becomes relevant to navigators is that there are usually 2 types of grassy plains. You may have one type of grass that is very short, no longer than 10 centimeters long, and these are known as recreational grasses. And these are the types of grasses that you may appropriate for use as a sports field to play football or rugby on. Then you may have other types of grass, which are tall grasses, and the best example of a tall grass is actually wheat. Tall grasses are a more serious pedestrian obstruction and should contribute to your pedestrian cost estimations. I would casually state that tall grasses could be compared to or should be compared with ferns because they are similarly soft. There are only marginal differences between tall grasses and ferns. It is my understanding that tall grasses can be navigationally safe and are generally non-hazardous. Next, I have promised to discuss Palustrian regions. Palustrian regions are areas where the ground is a mixture between water and soil. The muddy soil is generally unpleasant to get on your body. The muddy soil is abrasive on most fabrics, and you would want to wear scarpa when you went into muddy soil because those rocks will actually cut you. The Surgeon General's warning is to avoid Palustrian regions because they are not pleasant areas. The navigational hazards of Palustrian regions are that you may sink into the soil like quicksand. The ergonomic mechanic of immurement is used to describe people who are being buried alive. This one is also related to wallowing, which I have made a YouTube short on in the past, which describes people who have been covered in mud. The wallowing ergonomics specifically pertain to Palustrian regions or swamps, because this is the geographical niche where they are most relevant. The navigational hazards of swamps are greatly exacerbated by the presence of water. Also, the most relevant source of water is rainwater. Therefore, Palustrian regions are hazardous when it rains. There is a mechanic called breakout, where it is explained that when you step into the soil, your foot will become partially immured into the soil, meaning that your foot is buried in the soil. Breakout mechanics are a pedestrian mechanic which explain that it will require effort to lift your foot back out of the soil. The amount of effort required for breakout can be a lot of effort, and therefore a breakout may be a topic of active discussion or interest. There are other navigational topics which pertain to Palustrian regions, such as the use of devices known as surfactants as a means of preventing immurement or sinking. The most common and cost-effective surfactants are just a simple layer of plywood. The surfactant is a hard cover for the ground, which will prevent you from sinking, as it essentially behaves as a platform. These trails are also commonly known as boardwalks. I have seen mesh grids made out of plastic being used as surfactants before. This was an area which was sponsored by a major city. This may be considered a luxurious solution. Finally, a notable structure is actually a man-made structure called an earthen wall, which is when there is a Palustrian region and they will pile up dirt to form a raised platform. This platform is a solid foundation for walking on, and earthen walls should theoretically be very effective at preventing immurement. They are, however, expensive. My final advice for navigating Palustrian regions for today is to be mindful about the water in the area, as the water will exacerbate the risks of sinking. Next, I have promised to discuss the topic of geographical bayers. Bayers are areas which are not covered by trees, have little to no elevation change, and are not covered by water. It is commonly noted that standing in a bayer is like standing in the wide open. It can be punned that the bayer means that the earth is bare, as in bare naked. However, the geographical name for this region is a bayer. It is spelled with a Y. The geography of a bayer may have the following affordances. The bayer may be very flat. The geography of a bayer may also have excellent visibility. The bayer is an excellent staging area for major activities. You wouldn't schedule an event with your friends which was difficult to get through. You would not schedule an event at the top of Mount Everest or at the bottom of the ocean. Although if you did do this, this would be called having a party at the helm. The bayer is a staple of human geography because the bayer has excellent suitability for the let's just make this as simple as possible scenarios. Its characteristics lack major complexity, and there are reasons why you would schedule a private event in any place other than a bayer. When standing in a bayer, you are vulnerable to prying eyes. Bayers are so simple that you are likely to have to compete with families who brought their children to the forest reserve. So you may realize that this means that you have very stiff competition. You may realize that personally I don't like bayers very much. Lots of reasons for developing navigational abilities are actually about privacy, and for your own privacy you may plan navigations that stay away from bayers. My final note about bayers is that bayers are very efficient to travel through. You will have roadster statistics when traveling through a bayer. Anyways, this has been Machine Pencil Cartography. Thanks guys, and I am signing out.